July 17th, 2020. 270,000 people across Cartoon Network witnessed the last episode of the animated show Mao Mao, Heroes of Pure Heart. At the time of this video's release, we are entering the second year of not knowing where Mao Mao is going to be, a second season, or a complete cancellation. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of all of this is exactly where it ended. It leaves an unfinished story.
Also plugging my Discord.
Enter Mao Mao, an iron-willed, action-hungry good guy, and his nemesis, Orangusnake, a slightly as iron-willed but overall mischievous bad guy, and a fight over Pure Heart. A lot of longtime fans have seen this song and dance across various episodes, but there's something different about this one.
Stand still like that.
Both the good and bad guys operate under a shared goal of not wanting to be crushed to death by a bigger monster, and call time out. Well, most of them. Mao Mao and Orangusnake decide that this fight is more important than the greater threat to both of them, exhibiting a self-destructive and vindictive perspective that can only be fueled by a strong passion to destroy one another. It demonstrates the fundamental flaw shared between the two, that their tunnel vision ends up being their demise. In this case, both of them actually being crushed by said monster, despite their collective friends advising them to not go through with this. Mind you, we're only about a minute into this episode, and it's given us great action, lots of fast-paced animation, great comedy, and the main dynamic they wish to focus on.
I really did it, huh? I guess this is what comes after then.
No, they're not dead, but Mao Mao and Orangusnake are incredibly injured. Unlike a lot of scenes within wackier animation like this, where a character can be mangled, trampled, ripped apart, vaporized, and then have the next scene not acknowledge any of the implied or explicit injuries that a character has received because it's a cartoon, by not skipping recovery, we're offered a very unique dilemma between the two, where they have to coexist in a state where they'll inevitably harm themselves more in the pursuit of finishing off the other, and they don't care.
Mao Mao, this is all your fault! I'm gonna pop your head off! Ah!
Well, I'm gonna run you over with my hospital bag!
One thing I've always enjoyed about Mao Mao as a protagonist amongst all the other protagonists in animation today is that Mao Mao is not traditionally or conventionally trying to be the good guy. He's kind of a rude, harsh, debatably bloodthirsty hero who has moments of vulnerability, comedy, and a relatively better morality to justify the likability of him as a main character. This is the core reason why in some cases I just gravitate more towards the likes of Mao Mao or Gumball or Cuphead and all the other shows where the main character does not check off being super nice, super sweet, naive, incredibly cutesy in the way that they wish to save the world, and morally preachy, and all the other aspects I've detailed in so many videos up to this point. It's not that Mao Mao doesn't want to save the world, it's just that he wants to do it sword in hand, one bad guy at a time, beating them into submission, which to me just resonates more. This isn't to say that all protagonists in every single show should be written this way, but that having a variety of different protagonists on a singular network would allow for a wider amount of people to feel like there's a show on that network that speaks to them.
Look, I'm going to level with you. Your bones are so fragile right now that not even 3 cuddles and a hug could fix them. You see, they're full of these tiny little cracks, or as they're known in the medical field, whoopsie boo-boos. Think of them like this cheddar paw. If you two keep fighting them, poof, bye-bye bones. The good news is you'll be fully healed in a day or two. But until then...
This also isn't to say that Mao Mao, the show, isn't cutesy when one of its main characters is literally named Adorebat. The subtle shift is that Adorebat is the tritagonist, serving the bounce off of Mao Mao's abrasive nature in most episodes. The way that a lot of shows operate today, Adorebat would have been the main character. And while she's definitely garnered a subsection of fans that do enjoy her as a character, she's often best used when stacked up against characters that are nowhere near as nice or as sweet. For direct comparison, it would be like if the Ghost and Molly McGee focused more on Scratch than Molly, which I'm not saying I would want. I enjoy the show as it is, of course, but for a hypothetical scenario's sake, the dynamic between the two would imply that the show would change its tone and thus be a bit meaner, which is something I look for in animation quite a bit, growing up on a lot of it myself. In addition to the constant back and forth between Mao Mao and Orangusnake to the annoyance of the Doctor, we also get some minor but golden moments between their collective allies.
It's the sheriff's department!
Mess with the horse and you get the stretch!
Dude,
timesies.
Although they don't do too much, it is important to note that their morality isn't neutralized because of this timeout. The bad guys are still bad, disguising a cake as a way to sneak a weapon into the hospital room, demonstrating the differences in the way that they see timeouts. When confronted on it, there's a lot of easy to understand reactions to take. A, criticizing the bad guys for being morally inconsistent. B, getting Orangusnake to play fairly by removing the weapon from the situation. C, calling the doctor to rat him out, but he chooses D, criticize his own friends for not bringing him a weapon.
Because this is a hospital and I'm a good boy.
To me, that's what makes me enjoy the show, because his sense of morality isn't in portraying himself to be a nice person to all, but carrying himself in a manner that simply wants there to be less evil in the world in a way that doesn't impact anyone around him except the people who are responsible for it. It allows for him to continue to be likable, despite wanting a weapon to attack Orangusnake with. It's also important to mention one of the most important aspects in why this story works. Orangusnake is mutually as vindictive as Mao Mao.
I'm gonna pop your head off! Don't scream, don't scream. Oh, my knees! Oh, my shit! Oh, my patella! Hold still!
The mutual nature of their rivalry makes it enjoyable to watch because, in addition to evening the playing field, making their back and forth more enjoyable, their consent to the chaos allows for the writing to not make either of them unwatchable because they choose to act this way, and they don't do it in a way where they're simply trying to exist and having to deal with this annoyance.
I don't want to hear another peep out of either of you.
My cast is itchy. Oh, Scratchy's on.
Now, scratchies are for good boys.
The intertwined dynamics are grounded by characters like Badgerclops, who often don't take the hero aspect as seriously as Mao Mao, but acts very good nonetheless. The chaos is always rooted in the self-awareness that these characters are clearly too much even for each other, and that any reasonable person, hero or evildoer, would actually prefer to fight with their best foot forward, and not their broken foot forward. In fact, Badgerclops explicitly tells Mao Mao that if he continues down this path, he will lose every bone in his body. Things come to a boiling point when their hospital beds become part of the battle.
You drive!
This isn't to say that there isn't any other animated show that has action in the ballpark of Mao Mao and that Mao Mao is this unicorn, super unique show, but oftentimes a lot of shows that have action and great animation like this tend to be more on the serious side. It was a rare treat to have Rise of the TMNT or Glitch Tex, where the action was plentiful, it was full of chaos, battles of wits, but the show can still have a vibe of being comedic, and in Mao Mao's case, largely serialized. If anyone is turned away or confused as to why I praise Mao Mao for being a meaner show when we're talking about kid shows, I do feel like there's a fundamental disconnect. Morality is a spectrum, and a gray, blurry, subjective one at that. For example, how good is Bugs Bunny letting his adversaries walk into dangerous traps justifiably, contrasted against Phineas and Ferb, who merely want to maximize their summer vacation via spreading fun and joy throughout the tri-state area. They're two different types of good. Does this make Bugs Bunny less morally good than Phineas? I'll leave that up to you. What I do know is that Mao Mao and Orangusnake's combined hatred for each other ultimately is a battle between good and evil. Without Mao Mao and heroes like him, Orangusnake would terrorize Pureheart and it wouldn't be that much of a fun show. Without Orangusnake and villains like him, Mao Mao would lose the fulfillment and satisfaction he has, living and driving the force of evil out of the world, even if it is on a hospital bed.
I'm gonna crack you like an egg!
I'm gonna snap you in two! I gotta get more
cast.
My boots!
Sure, there's better ways to accomplish what Mao Mao wishes to, from healing to at the very least not making things inconvenient for the other hospital goers around him, but those flaws allow for Mao Mao as a character to explore some grayer options for a hero and have him balance on being a self-righteous hero or a selfish vigilante. And that balance of wherever he is on that line is exactly why a lot of people enjoy Mao Mao and want to see it continue on strong with a second season. If you believe that I am using Mao Mao as an outlier, especially on Cartoon Network, that word, consider the last decade or two. Ed, Edd and Eddy, Foster's Home, Billy and Mandy, Flapjack, Total Drama, Ben 10, Powerpuff Girls. These are shows with main or major characters that don't always exemplify what we consider to be conventionally good, but there's a large amount of people who enjoy these shows, and for good reason. It's entertaining, it's relatable, and more importantly, the characters are ultimately likable regardless. Both of them crash out of the window and fall into a hole filling with cement, and it doesn't take too long for both of them to snap out of their episode-long battle.
I've waited so long to finally destroy you with my own Wait, why are my hands numb?
Wait, what did you just say?
I've waited so long to destroy you?
Of course. If we keep fighting, this cement will destroy us both. And I'll never have the opportunity to end you with my own 2 hands.
A small detail I was interested to see how they were going to tackle is the aspect of Orangusnake needing his lower half to require air, which shows that the only way that they would agree to a timeout is if they're both in life-threatening situations that'll make both of their respective goals unattainable if they continue. They do end up getting out of this situation, but it's the way that they do that makes it the most memorable part of this episode.
Did you just break your own bones? Just to save yourself?
No, Orangusnake. I did it to save you.
It's so weird and gross and unorthodox to see this being the solution. I would imagine in today's atmosphere, the idea of breaking all of your bones would be a bit much, but I believe they handled the topic well, keeping it relatively clean for Cartoon Network standards, and keeping the atmosphere of it all quite epic. It takes a grand sacrifice on Mao Mao's effort to save Orangusnake this way, but I would imagine given his large bravado and the way that he perceives the ideal hero to be, I'm sure he wouldn't have had it any other way. Oddly, Orangusnake doesn't understand why Mao Mao would save him, somewhat implying that he wouldn't have done the same if Mao Mao was in his place. That is why Mao Mao is a hero and Orangusnake is a villain within the show. Mao Mao still has a sense of morals and principles even if he stubbornly follows them to the detriment of his own body and annoyance from Badger Clops. It doesn't take a Harvard professor to know that Mao Mao ultimately means well. However, it will take all of the luck in the world to see if Mao Mao will continue from here, because that's where it ends. It may be already dead in the water, but Cartoon Network would be losing out on one of its best shows this decade, and one of my favorite shows since the end of Gumball. But ultimately, we don't know. Until then, take care. Alpha out.